Which microphone is requesting a point of personal privilege?
Mic one. Mic one.
Mic one?
Point of personal privilege?
Yes, Mr. Heiss.
I feel I need to respond to Termott. The Mises Caucus has also offered Mike Termott the vice presidential position.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Heiss.
But UCC commercial code is, if you're smart, you dig into it. It's something that you can use to get yourself out of trouble and regain your personal sovereignty and your financial independence. There's some weird stuff that happens with maritime law too.
Right. Do you think the chair properly supported Chase Oliver under the bylaws? Is that your opinion?
Yes, I think that is.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. Well, that's disqualifying.
And so, the answer is take our fucking entire military and put them on our border and secure our border.
Dave was a groomsman at my wedding.
Is getting private funding to be chair, a conflict of interest?
In 2022, as I began to campaign for this role, I compared us to the Israelites wandering in the desert. And I have brought you to the edge of the promised land, and we have glimpsed it. But someone now has to be the one to lead you over the edge and into the promised land. Kind of like Moses, my role is to die on this hill.
This is a CNN tactic that's being used right now, and I think the people who see this video are going to understand that.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Angela, for that introduction.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fakertarians podcast. I'm your host, John Hudak, along with Jeremy Kantorowicz, Archie Flower, and our guest, Phil Rein. How you doing today, Phil?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Pretty good. So we're going to be talking about a few different things today. We're going to go into a little bit of Phil's background and some things he's working on with LPAlliance. And then we're going to talk about some of the happenings in the party. So just to start things off, Phil, how did you first get involved in the libertarian movement and the Libertarian Party in general?
Yeah, I think, I've started to realize that I'm classified probably as a second generation libertarian. And I didn't recognize it until going to some interacting with more libertarians kind of in this space, because I've basically stayed out of the party. I mostly just existed as one. But growing up, we weren't allowed to pledge allegiance to the flag. It was always very skeptical of government and, really respecting individuals and their rights and, letting people live their lives as they want to. And so that was kind of just how I existed. And I basically would go out in the world and speak to friends, colleagues, coworkers kind of about these ideas, and kind of always stayed out of the party, somewhat of the idea of I didn't see it, as a huge thing that I could contribute to. And I still, I kind of struggle with the parliamentary stuff currently. So, I realized in 2024, as I was sitting there going, things are really bad in my perspective of what the party is doing. And I knew about the kind of prior fights that happened within the party over caucuses. And I recognized that if people like me don't come back and come in there and start having these conversations, that it's going to continue down this trajectory. And so if people like me who doesn't really, see a huge value of I'm going to be in there and make some sort of change, if we don't show up and at least say, this is something I agree with, this is something I disagree with, then things aren't going to go well. And so, but by sitting back and kind of listening to some people that have fought in the battles before, I kind of came to conclusions about what I thought were maybe some of the reasons why things went the way they went, and why we're at such a kind of divided state in the party. And then so it kind of became a mission to say, how do we unite the party for the party and for spreading liberty forward? And so that's why we kind of developed LPAlliance, which is a inter-caucus coalition. The goal is to bring people together that really just want to see the party grow. And it doesn't matter where ideologically you lie, as long as you kind of agree that the party needs to be distinct and different than the duopoly, and that you come in there in good faith and be willing to hear kind of all sides. And so far it's been good. Obviously, it's interesting because I've never spoke to a bunch of libertarians before, and everyone always told me that it was going to be nonstop fighting and things like that. And inside the alliance, we don't have that problem. I think it's maybe because we have so narrowly focused goals. But so far it's been kind of inspiring to see.
So was there a specific event that made you want to get involved and join the party as far as problems that you saw with it? or was it kind of just like a totality of the circumstances type thing?
I think it was a totality of the circumstances when I realized that like I wasn't calling myself a libertarian anymore, and I had gotten to the point so far to remove the registration because I was like, this no longer represents me at all, especially with the sort of stuff that comes out of LPNH, and then the further supporting of the duopoly and kind of the Trump stuff, and then the disrespect towards Chase, who I viewed as a very principled minarchist. And so then when I saw the kind of stuff that was happening, it was like, oh man, all of this together, like I can choose to just stay out of it, right, and keep not defining myself as this word anymore, or try to get involved and see if this word can be salvaged and kind of the meaning behind it can be restored. And I hope it's possible, and I hope more people get involved in that process and are willing to say, hey, we should do this. We shouldn't just give up on this thing that people have spent their lives either living by or working directly in the party for.
So I know you said that LPAlliance is an inter-caucus coalition. So there's a lot of different types of libertarians in there. But as far as the Mises Caucus, what are your thoughts on the Mises Caucus itself and what it's turned into, what it stands for at this point?
Yeah, I would say it's kind of hard to define, right? Because it seems like there's multiple of them now. It seems like there's ones that are like very much into a centralized top-down authority from Heiss and without question and absolute controlled narrative. And then you have people that are like, hey, a lot of the principles that was talked about, I believe in and what I want to see for the party, but what's going on there is not that, right? And so I don't know why they're still holding on to the moniker of still calling themselves Mises Caucus. But like to each their own, if they're tied to a brand, whatever. Really, I care about actions. And so like when you see people pushing away from this like top down, narrative control and almost like cult like behavior that like if you step out of line, all of a sudden you're gone. So I think there has to be distinctions, right, between which people are able to work in a inter-caucus coalition and who aren't. Right, I would imagine anyone who's for this top-down control process is not going to be super willing to come to a table and discuss about how do we get to something that's agreeable. And then there's the other ones that are like, hey, actually, I could see this really promoting liberty forward if we could just kind of get a unity going here and kind of, maximize the things we agree on and try to minimize some of the things we disagree on. And as long as it remains respectful and nobody's kind of counter-representing each other, I think it gives a place where this could actually happen. But then I probably should also be distinct that there are obviously members that were among the Mises Caucus who just ideologically represent something so far from libertarianism to me and to many others that like they probably just wouldn't fit in, that they would immediately be like, hey, if they're out there just championing Jeremy Kauffman posts, they're probably not going to be super comfortable inside of the alliance.
So just based on everything you're saying, I would take it you're not a huge Angela McArdle fan. Would I be correct in that?
Yeah, no. I think the damage that was done under her leadership will take possibly 10, 20 years to repair. If the name is, if we can actually save the Libertarian Party in general. Yeah, I think she was highly damaging. I think her process of disrespecting members, longtime people that have devoted their lives to this, was despicable from a chair. And, I get it. We're libertarians, right? So like we want people to be able to say what they want and be a little crass here and there. But when you become the person that's kind of being the representative of the party and the organizational structure of it, I hold that to a higher standard. I don't know. Maybe that's, maybe they would call me a woke libertarian, but that's the way I would do it. Say, please don't be throwing slurs at members for no reason.
Seems pretty reasonable.
I would think so. I would think so.
And
it's just crazy to see the way that she operated for the last few years and just, really just ripped the party apart, destroyed it internally, and just everything she's done from it. You're right, probably a good 10 years at least to really bring it back, which this would be what the kind of the second or third time that the party's kind of been through that that cycle a bit.
Yeah, I know there have been issues in the past where there were kind of some similar fights like this between the more paleo side and the others. I know there was the one in the 80s. And then obviously Bob Barr was nominated in 2008. But this cycle has seemed especially destructive. When you look at the numbers of donations and members, it's just an absolute crater at this point. I know that when our podcast last week, we had Joe Bishop Henchman in the comments, and he's the former chair of the Libertarian Party, for anyone who doesn't know. And he was saying, I think it was something along the lines of, if they had a month where donations were under 200,000, they would see it as like an emergency. And I think we're hovering, besides the RFK joint fundraising committee money, I think we're hovering somewhere around like 60K a month. It's pretty consistently under 100,000. So it just shows how much things have really fallen off.
Yeah, it's that, and we see the new chair basically talking about bailing out the credit card debt of the former chair by selling the only physical asset our party had. And within the LP Alliance, there are people that say we should sell it. There are people that we say we don't. These are open discussions that we have respectfully about the merits. And luckily, because we know everybody's there in good faith, we're not immediately like, oh, you're doing this just to cover up. But for somebody that's in there, there's other options, right? He's in a chair position where he could kind of open up communication again with libertarians that have walked away and really do targeted phone calls of like, what do you need to see to come back, right? And this would be anybody would do. If you run a business and you suddenly lost, more than 50% of your business, the first thing you're going to do is call those customers and be like, what happened? Why are you leaving? And ideally, he would be willing to enact some of those behavioral changes within the party culture in general to fix it. But so far I've not been super excited about it. I think he says the right things in the right places. He'll get into a comment and then say the right thing. But as a Machiavellian would, right, he's going to distort narrative and try to change things to gain power. And I think the onus is on everybody else to look at that and go, is this real? And so then don't take words at anything, only take actions. And I'm waiting to see one that makes me go like, yes, there's a real chance this person can try to help heal the divide in the party.
I think we need to see something like particularly bold for me to really think that Stephen Nikela himself is going to turn this party around. An example of that would be, and this is something we talked a little bit about before the show started, would be disaffiliating the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, or at least looking into some kind of solution to that issue, at least issue some kind of condemnation from national, so that people don't think that that's what's representative of the party. For anyone who doesn't know, the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire had their convention today, and the Mises side won by a pretty good margin. I know there were some issues with some delegates being disenfranchised because apparently they shut off signups for the convention early, and then they decided to vote on whether people who signed up late could be delegates or not. And so they just, like, one by one, so they just picked, since the Mises caucus had the room, they just picked the people they liked to be delegates. But I mean, it was a pretty sizable victory. I think it was something like 54-28.
Yeah, but I know, I think 20 some people were kept out, right? So I think it was enough where it would be kind of on the margins.
Yeah.
I still think they probably, more probably could have been done in New Hampshire to bring in people. The point, I think the whole point of Jeremy's strategy, and hopefully not Ben's moving forward, but as of today, it seemed like a couple posts went out that he probably could have stopped, that he didn't.
Right.
But that strategy is to push people away, to be like, I can't associate with this because of what it represents. And that's what they want, right? They want people to be unwilling to go there and say enough is enough. They also would want to use intimidation tactics. And, some of the members have been in chat rooms in various places talking about, forceful remover behaviors that wouldn't be looked kindly in any libertarian circle that's against aggression. But I think it's going to be on libertarians that are there going like, enough is enough. You don't represent us, to really change it there. And if they're not willing to do that because it is so toxic, that it will have to fall on national to do something, censor them, like you said, do a call out. But things need to change there if they're going to ever clean up the image of the party, and bring back a bunch of people that were gone. I listened to a podcast. I can't remember what the guy's name is, but the argument was like, we don't want any of those, people that did economic warfare to destroy the party to come back. And it's like, look, this is a free market system. We're not going to fund things we disagree with, right? And that's what'll have to happen if the party wants to gain back donors, people that are actually professionals out in the real world that have money to spend on a party, right?
Right. It's just wild that they did a hostile takeover of the party, and they called it a takeover. Like, they referred to it as the Mises Caucus takeover, and then they get mad that there are a bunch of people who don't want to donate anymore. Like, it wasn't, oh, we're coming into the party to come work with you. We just want to help. We want to be reinforcements, and we'll provide some ideas, and we'll all work together. It was like, no, we're taking over. We're doing things our way. I remember, Jeremy, do you remember if it was Jeff Douglas who had that line about the donors? The fuck your donors, we'll find more.
I can't remember who it was. It might have been Jeff. It was one of the earlier bigger figures in Mises, and fuck your money, we'll find your donors. The crypto whales are coming, and they just thought that money would just fall into their laps, and by being edgy and kissing up to internet conservatives. And obviously that didn't ever happen.
I mean, unless you're Austin Padgett.
Yeah. So it just, it just was absolutely crazy. They didn't try. They don't know how to fundraise. I don't know how to fundraise. I'm bad at it. So I'm never going to, put myself into that kind of position, but they don't know how to fundraise or operate an organization. They just don't have that knowledge, and they got rid of all the institutional knowledge,
right? And that's a big part of it.
To do that.
There were people that were in the party for decades that actually knew what they were doing, and they purposely scared those people away. They wanted their own people there. I know that Heiss had talked about how he didn't want the party to run like a democracy. He wanted it to run like a private business with a clear organization and a clear person in charge, but they just got rid of everyone else. And when the person in charge, if it's run like that, has no idea what they're doing, it's not going to end well. I actually just saw a tweet pop up on my timeline. Let me see. Yeah, that's pretty on point with everything we're talking about right now. Actually, because Ben Weir responded to it, and it definitely doesn't give me any optimism that Ben Weir is going to be anything different for LPNH. Not that I really had any, but it's from Angela McCardle, and it says, "Congratulations to LPNH on blocking the Lolberts and remaining insufferable. When I first became chair of LP National, I did not understand the importance of LPNH. They caused me stress with their outrageously offensive tweets. I spent a lot of time apologizing for their behavior and trying to find ways to make them calm down. I understand now that they fill an important role, making the party inhospitable to the regressive leftist weirdos who infiltrated the party during Gary Johnson's race. Thank you for doing what you do, even though it causes me some pain occasionally." And Ben just responded saying thank you. So if there was any optimism that Ben was going to be any different, which like I said, I didn't really have much. I don't think that's going to happen. And I think Jeremy Kaufman also got onto the board. I forget if it's as secretary. Or secretary. Yeah. So it's going to be an expect more of the same thing. There were some tweets from LPNH earlier today calling Nick Sarwark a gay slur. There was another one Kaufman tweeted out where it was from the LPNH convention booklet, and it was a play on the white supremacist 14 words. Only one word was changed. It says, We must secure the existence of our people and a future for libertarian children. Usually the white supremacist version just says white children, so it's not like it's particularly different. I know they've done some plays on that before, but I think it's obvious who they're trying to pander to there. I don't think that's going to be a great outcome there.
Yeah, that advertisement is actually next to an advertisement for Liberty Plus, which is kind of a grouping that is trying to promote kind of a white-only libertarianism and even white-only America. So it's a sad place for LPNH in my mind. It sucks that the brand name is kind of attached to them. But I will say for Ben, I had tried to reach out to him privately a few times to see like what his social media stance was going to be moving forward. I had spoke to people that were friends with him when he was in California. People that said like, we had great friendship or whatever. And a lot of people are kind of saddened and don't understand what had happened, that he was, in the past kind of a pretty good person. I don't know him personally, all I can do is try to reach out and make him understand or try to convince him about why this is not the right pathway forward. I think a lot of times we immediately want to just, yell in these people's faces. I don't think it usually gets it done. I think it usually emboldens them and makes them side with people that kind of further ingrain that. And so the hope will be that, communication can continue and maybe this could be something that could be talked out of him. But, if his whole goal is to like keep somebody like me out of the party, like somebody that came to libertarianism, kind of growing up in a skeptical household, but then ultimately kind of figuring out who I was in that through like a Ron Paul change when that happened, when that election happened, I think like I'm the kind of person that he's going to be keeping out of there, right? It's just somebody that wants a professional party, somebody that doesn't want this to represent the ideas that way. I don't want to establish a society that doesn't have money or, a commune or anything like that. And so I think labeling automatically everybody you don't agree with as leftist communist is a tactic that people do to disarm, political opponents all the time. And I look at it as disingenuous. And but hopefully he will listen, but I don't have hope, just like you said. I don't have that either.
So Phil, I
What's up,
have a question if you're willing to field something.
Of course.
Yeah, so I'm assuming you're going to be a delegate to Grand Rapids. If someone proposes a reinstatement of the bigotry is irrational and repugnant plank, will you vote yes?
Me personally, or what would I recommend for the coalition that I'm in?
You personally.
So I personally would. I think there was nothing wrong with that, and I think I think bigotry is irrational and repugnant. I think collectivism in general is kind of, libertarians will look at the state as being what causes the most tyranny usually. But before governments existed, it was collectivism and tribalism, right? And so if we don't guard against that as well, especially among our midst, I think it's a problem. When we give prescriptions to government, you can make an argument that like, as long as we're saying the government shouldn't do that and be equal under the law, then that's a little bit different. The coalition, there's debate about it. There's people I disagree with in there. We're not, our goal is to just bring people together and have conversations about what would be an acceptable outcome, because many of the people that wouldn't want that in there also don't like the sort of stuff that's coming out of LPNH, right? Because they, like I've spoken to some people in like certain caucuses that I respect, and I don't view those people as bigots, but they're like, if we put this in there, it's going to cause divisional problems. And so I can at least understand why there would be
division with who?
What?
Division with who?
Well, so I think the biggest question here comes from like what you would define it as. And this is the argument I always hear and the argument I always kind of fight back against. Would somebody using a certain language in a joke be somebody that I would consider a bigot? I don't know. Depends on the joke. And I think this is where there's a kind of co-opting of this whole narrative that has allowed them to get away with like actual people like Jeremy getting away with it. And so the minute you mislabel somebody that actually doesn't have hate in their heart, you lose battle, right? You lose strategic alliances that would happen there because they're like, hey, somebody made a joke like Dave Chappelle, who came out and said some pretty crazy stuff about trans people. I don't think he actually has hate in his heart for trans people. In fact, he came out and said, like, I'm just trying to understand how I deal with things I don't understand as I make comedy about it. And so for those sorts of people, I would say, maybe that word would isolate them out. And so I think this is where the rationale comes from. And I don't particularly agree with it, right? But I can at least listen to it and understand, hey, this is why somebody might not want that there. But I think because it was made a big deal out of it, the people that are self-avowed bigots have been able to kind of skirt along with people that might just be like, hey, certain comedy I don't consider bigoted, right? And I think that's where there's kind of a blurry line portion that needs to be discussed, right? And I can understand why why so many people were turned off by it being removed, because it has allowed those people to kind of come in with wolves in comedians' clothing to enact actual behaviors that I do find repugnant.
Should we be messaging to bigots to come into the party?
No, it's the reason why I'm completely against how LPNH handles things. Yeah.
Okay. Should we be messaging to repel bigots from the party?
I would agree personally. Yes, Archie. Yes, but again, you can question and give a line of questioning to try to make this like a battle over the word. I'm telling you what arguments I've heard back, and I will tell you that these people that I've spoken to are not bigots, right? So I think that's where you may look at this as like we have to do this, but in general, there's been this thing in the media where automatically anybody who criticizes Israel is an anti-Semite, right? You have this thing where you say the wrong thing and you're a bigot, right? And that's been a cultural thing, and it gets people fired even though they didn't mean anything. They don't hate anybody, and so I think there's a pushback against that, and you have contrarian people that are like, pushing back against that narrative. And in some cases, I think they're right. In some cases, I think they're wrong. And I think if we label it as a party alone, it can cause problems for certain people that think that way, right?
Forget the plank and just
in general, yeah, I think bigots. I don't think Jeremy should feel comfortable. I think I want to develop a commune.
Then what
there
messaging should we have as a party that repels the Jeremy Kaufmans and Jared? What's his last name? The new chair, not new chair, the re-elected chair. Is it Bell?
Oh, Jared Bell. I think it was Bell. Yeah, the guy in Georgia.
The Jared Bell,
Yeah.
the Roger Roots, the white supremacists, and all the other bigots that have flooded in since Reno. What do we do to repel them?
I think the minute we have enough numbers to take over, a lot of those people will go away. Right? I think the minute they no longer can utilize the apparatus of the party to promote their worldview, they will go away. And I will, at the LPPA convention, somebody came in there, somebody who earlier in the conversation with me had said something along the lines of, I could care less if the Libertarian Party died. He was promoting removing the word equal from a line. He wanted to remove self-ownership, ostensibly to promote slavery of some kind, people being able to sell themselves into slavery. And that person was shot down, and then he wasn't there the next day, right? So I think a lot of these people, when they know they're not welcome and they know they can't utilize it as a tool, they will go away, right? And so that's what I think will have to happen. People will have to be unafraid to go there, because right now they're making it toxic and people are unwilling to go there to make a change. And like, until people are like, okay, I have to go in here to make this change. And as long as I'm clear that I do not stand for this, that this association should not hurt me, right? I think that's the part that people have to get over. It's the reason why I wasn't associated with the party, why I removed my Libertarian from my name, is because like I don't want to be tied to LPNH. I don't want people to think that's what I believe. And that's what they want, right? Angela said it herself. That's what she wants. And I think it will be on people to say no, and we are going to come back and we are going to make the party back to libertarian roots, no longer supporting Republicans, no longer letting certain people use the tools and the apparatus of the party to promote these ideas that are so counter to things that we all believe in. Does that answer the question of like what we do about it?
So then, with regards to LPNH, if you were on the LNC, would you introduce a motion to disaffiliate them?
Oh yeah, surely. Yes. Yeah, of course.
That'd be nice.
Do you think that you should, as the leader of LPAlliance, guide the LPAlliance to unify around that key point.
So I probably should be clear that I'm not a leader. There is no leader in it. Maybe that's a distinction that wasn't known. I just started a Discord and then literally handed over the keys to it. Right. So I think anytime you have a real coalition of people of different minds, like in different ideologies, as long as everybody there is there in good faith and they're like, hey, what did we actually want for the party, and we kind of come to some base level agreement, then it'll work just fine. And again, I think any top down structure doesn't work. So if I'm sitting there being like, this is what we do, maybe if it's a good idea, people agree, and that's where people suggest what we do, how do we move forward here, what strategies are going forward. But I am not the one leading it. So just to be clear.
And I will say, too, that from what I've seen from at least the vast majority of the people in LPAlliance, I think a lot of them would be on board with disaffiliating LPNH, at least from the people I've talked to there.
I mean, everybody I've talked to has been that way. Like I said, we kind of already have the culture of like, this is what we find acceptable, this is what we kind of don't. And there's no ground rules to it, but like they wouldn't feel comfortable. They would not be in the Discord long if some of them came in there and started talking like they talk out in LPNH.
And I don't think a lot of people would have joined it in the first place anyway, unless they had big problems with the direction of the party and the direction that the Mises Caucus is going. I think that's obviously, it's not just centered, like people have different ideas. It's not just centered around being anti-Mises Caucus, but if these people agreed with the Mises Caucus and the direction that the party is going, I don't think they'd be joining LPAlliance or anything like that.
No, there was two key distinctions too. Like when I went to LPPA, I kind of learned right away, right? There was people that would say the Libertarian Party is through my lens and my worldview alone, right? And that this is the only way it could go. Whereas I think the party shouldn't be doing that, because you have left and right libertarians, and as long as they're not, far right and far left, I think we basically all would get along pretty well, right? And I spoke to one person that was very much like, if the Libertarian Party is not promoting right libertarian ideals, it doesn't deserve to exist. And then I spoke to other libertarians that are like, we should make them neutral principles that we all agree to and promote them, right? And keep kind of special interests out of it, and then let each kind of group underneath it kind of operate. And I think this is something that would allow for our party to get more professional. I think we would end up in a case where you would have somebody running, let's say an LPPA, an LPNH type person is running for Senate. And we're like, we don't want that to represent us. It would force a primary condition where automatically you would now have a competition between these two. And I think very obviously, if you look at kind of Shane Hazel out of Georgia versus Chase's numbers, you find out very quickly which one is actually popular among people, right? And so I think if a primary process happened, that person would lose, and then that influence within the party, the whole will for them to continue the fight goes away if it can no longer be a tool. And then the people that are honest, right-leaning libertarians that do want, their version to kind of propagate, they will put forth people that are good, right? They won't put forth people like Shane Hazel, right? So this is where I think there's probably a distinction of like how you handle removing bad actors in general, depending, right? LPNH is its own unique beast that I have an opinion about, and I think most people in the alliance would agree with it. But in other states, how do you professionalize it, get it neutral, so all sides can come together, and then have individual levels of competition, promotion of their interpretations of the principles. And I think we probably agree more than we disagree with a lot of people, right? I've met a bunch of former Mises Caucus people that I think are people of good character. And I don't like the fact that a lot of times those people get painted with broad brushes when they deserve a pathway to kind of prove that they're of good character and interact and be in good faith.
John and I are both former Mises. Did you know that?
That is
I
true.
did, yeah. And so this is what I mean by it, that it's a ongoing process. I think a lot of them now have broken away, and either formed, separate caucuses. Some maybe worse caucuses than when they came from. But in general, I think as long as these kind of conversations happen, where you have somebody that may be former Mises, of wherever the spectrum they were, and center libertarians and left libertarians talking, that's how you get things done. Like that's how you actually move and grow the party, is by allowing each of these groups to kind of recruit and gain momentum, while also finding ways to guard against like the worst among them. And these are discussions that happen of like, how do you guard among people that want to represent our brand horribly, and we had a little bit of the discussions here, but these are things that are ongoing of how do we actually professionalize the party.
Does Shane Hazel belong in the Libertarian Party?
Personally, I think he's a unbelievably poor representative, and I would not want him anywhere around me. No.
And he's gotten a lot worse even since he ran for. I forget if he ran for governor. I think it was. He's gotten really mask off on social media where he's just openly like Jewish question posting.
Yeah,
like it's not even masked anymore.
As like Pete
Quinones.
I can never pronounce his last name.
Quinones, yeah.
PDQ. Kind of the same path there.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a pipeline. They talk about the pipeline in the party, and it exists. I don't have the answers of how these things get solved, right? But the point is that if people from all stripes of libertarians are talking about the issues and about what are the best ways forward, I think that's the way we do it. And I think automatically like labeling people or branding past actions, right? I think a lot of people can have really bad pasts or statements that they don't agree with anymore. And if you automatically shut down the pathway to reconciliation, like that just further ingrains somebody into extremism, right? Like I've been listening to a bunch of people that have kind of come out of extremist groups, various types. And it's almost always the feeling that there is no other option, right? That they're kind of stuck. And I think getting through to some of them is just saying like, look, you have a pathway. You don't have to stay there,
Have you?
And we'll see how it plays out, right? Have I run for office? No, man.
Yeah.
I wasn't even involved in the party, in general.
So
also recently.
Here's my question for you. Pretend you were running for a fairly visible office like state senate. Now pretend that someone directly asks you why you're a libertarian when they're tweeting about sending people of color back to Africa.
Yeah, I mean,
Because
again,
that's what
this is the
LPNH
reason-
does.
This is the reason why I think it's important that we do this, is so that doesn't exist anymore, right? I think you have two kind of answers to that, right? Do you just say automatically that because of that we are just going to give up on the word? Because then let's say we move to some other word, right? That it'll just get co-opted again if people aren't willing to have a stand and say, okay, we're going to do what we can to try to stop this. But yeah, I don't know what my response would be. I think I would have to have a long thought out thing. I've never thought about running as a person before, but I would probably make a distinction between the philosophies that come out of one affiliate and the one that I do. The problem is I don't like the fact that a politician would have to make that argument. And that's kind of why I find it important that we do this, that we get involved, that people come back and change it, because it's not fair for somebody that is a principled libertarian of good character that wants to run, that they have to answer for these people up in New Hampshire. Right. And so, I think you're trying to get to a question that like, why even stay? Everybody's got to have their own personal response of why, right? I think in general, I've lived by a word and I think it has value. I think the principles that underlie it are beautiful and they would be viral if they weren't being represented so poorly. And hopefully that representation that's done so poorly can go away and we can actually grow. And we're kind of missing kind of a perfect opportunity right now where the Democrats are faltering. We could have been set up at this point if we would have rolled the momentum of 2016 with Gary Johnson, regardless of how you feel about him running as a president. We could have rolled that momentum to the point where we may be set to replace them in 2028 as one of the major parties. And we've lost all that because of an internal destruction, right? And so I hope that that's still possible. And I also generally believe, I believe voluntary interaction between, people that are of good faith is how any sort of minarchist world would work, or even an anarchist world would work. And if that can't be done and work together to figure out how to fix the party and stop some of these bad actors, then essentially the whole worldview is gone, right? And the idea that a coercion-free world is possible kind of maybe goes out the window. And at that point, maybe I just build a bunker with, machine guns on top of it and defend it and, grow an organic farm. And, so I think there's a lot riding on it for a lot of people that believe that this philosophy has to be able to exist. Otherwise, we are stuck in an increasingly coercive, increasingly violent world. And I hope that it's possible.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for rising to the occasion of, if not replacing, then at least standing in for the Democrats as in opposition to Trump, because they're just absolutely flailing right now. Trump is doing all sorts of authoritarian things. And instead of the Libertarian Party screaming at the top of its lungs about how immigrants are being sent to Guantanamo, we're basically playing MAGA Junior right now.
Yeah.
No, it's horrible.
Archie, you got any more? Or do you want to move to another topic?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay, I didn't want to cut you off. I did want to bring up the Libertarian Party of Georgia convention being today. I know we touched on that a little bit. The Mises caucus did win the chair position, but it sounds like the actual makeup of the majority of the board is no longer Mises, and it was Chase Oliver that was running for the non-Mises side for chair. Phil, do you know how many votes it was? It was a pretty small margin, right?
Yeah, I've heard it was like 3 votes difference between him getting on and him not getting on.
Which is pretty rough, because this guy, Jared Bell, we've posted about him from Fakertarians before, and some of his social media activity makes it seem, it's hard to deny that he's into some form of Christian nationalism. There was a post from November, or actually his reply was from December of 2023 from, there was an account called Right Wing Watch that posted about a guy who said that state or church or civil government must always operate under the presupposition that Christ is Lord, and said that we must abolish abortion, pornography, no fault divorce, and institute public shaming. And that, to be clear, it wasn't Jared Bell saying this, it was a right-wing pastor, but he responded based to that on Twitter. There was also a person back in November of 2014. I have these actual screenshots, so I can't see what this person is replying to. But this person says, so the gallows for an 18-year-old girl who has a one-night stand in 2023 and buys a Plan B pill. That's your position. You should have a little more courage. Lead with that in all your tweets regarding abortion and stop wasting everyone's time. I don't think Jared Bell, the Georgia chair, was involved in the conversation before that. But Jared responded to that saying, live footage of the person saying it, discovering the consistent biblical pro-life position. And it is it looks like a GIF of Richard Simmons gasping and putting his hand over his chest. So it seems like the chair of LP Georgia is saying that the consistent biblical pro-life position, which it does seem like he's endorsing, at least based on the context here, is that an 18-year-old girl who uses Plan B needs to be executed. So I know we talked about how LPNH has a lot of bad press for the Libertarian Party. If there's any kind of messaging out of Georgia that sounds like this, I think it's going to be a lot of the same.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
You said you weren't sure who they were replying to?
So I'm not sure who. So a guy named Joel Berry, who I don't know who he is, made that original post, and Jared Bell replied to that. But it looks like Joel Berry was also replying to someone.
Yeah, one of the worst. A guy named Smash Bales. He's a huge Christian nationalist voice.
Well, that tracks. I figured it was something along those lines.
Yeah. I just loaded the tweet up, and it's one of the worst.
Fun stuff. But the fact that, I mean, it's great that the rest of the board, or at least a large portion of the rest of the board, went anti-Mises or the non-Mises slate. But the fact that Bell still won shows there are still some serious issues going down in Georgia. I know Georgia has been kind of a Mises stronghold for a bit, despite the fact that Chase was down there. But it is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, it would have been. I think it would have been a big morale boost in general if Chase would have won that, and it would have been look, people are entirely rejecting everything that you guys have been standing for lately. The only hope is that if there is enough people there, that sort of messaging won't come directly through it. But it is something that people need to be calling out. You're trying to utilize a party that's designed for individualism and widespread expression, regardless of religious affiliation. To now be utilizing that as a bullhorn for it. It's hopefully that doesn't happen. But if it does, we'll criticize it when it does.
For sure. And hopefully the Libertarian National Committee will do something about it. I'm not optimistic about that. I think there's a few members that I could think of that probably would be willing to do something about LPNH and about a situation like that. But I think Stephen Nikela probably just doesn't want to rock the boat. And there are definitely people on the LNC, Adrian Malagon, who probably wouldn't have an issue with a lot of that messaging. So as long as the LNC is made up as it is right now, I don't see anything happening. I hope I'm wrong, but hopefully we can get some change there. Phil, as far as the prognosis for the party, are you optimistic that we can get things turned around?
Yeah, actually, I am. I think there was more people when I was at LPPA. We didn't make any phone banking that were much more willing to be neutral than were wanting to project their worldview through the party. And I think there's going to be many states that are like that. My guess is there are some people that have bought the propaganda against Chase, and that's the only reason why he lost in Georgia, that they were thinking that he's a communist or whatever. And my guess is that was kind of the biggest reason why he lost, that those three people were. And it's unfortunate that people, this propaganda works, right? They promote something, they say it enough times, and people start to believe it without ever listening to Chase himself. But I think the signs of the numbers dwindling, the signs of the people that are going along, kind of sitting along the sidelines, going along with the worst of the ideas of that group, is getting larger, and the ones that are trying to promote it are getting smaller. And the progression of that decay process is such that I think by next year or the following year, it'll be there. And the worst case scenario, it'll be by 2028. I think the majority of them will have been pushed out. And this is hopefully what it'll get to, but I definitely am optimistic that people are tired of this kind of constant divide that shouldn't really even exist for most of the people, and that it's really just a small group that's trying to cause that divide. And so that's kind of the goal of LPAlliance, is hey, we all agree pretty dang well in this one region. We should be trying to make the party better, trying to grow it, make it into an actual political force. Because this idea of us selling out our party to the highest bidder to get one concession, if you consider it a concession, I think that is a unmotivating strategy for people on their side, and it'll be a very motivating strategy for people that want to see the party actually be a force for liberty. So optimism in general.
I'm glad to hear that. I think the whole thing with Angela, it doesn't seem to me like it was planned as a strategy or anything like that, the whole Trump thing. I mean, maybe it was. Maybe they wanted to elect Trump from the beginning. But it seems like she was so desperate for some kind of win with how everything was falling apart. I mean, she even said herself in the leaks that are referred to as the Angela Papers or the Angela Files now, that the takeover is turning into a disaster. And she was going off about how all their major figures like Tom Woods and Dave Smith are stepping away, and they turned into MAGA supporters too. But I think she knew that things were just rapidly spiraling out of control. And she just wanted to do what she could to preserve her image and apparently her finances.
Yeah. It's hard to say what exactly all the plan was. I mean, definitely, there's obviously definitely been mega influence within, Mises since the beginning. But it's a wonder what was, supposed to be the plan, or, what they were working for. They obviously didn't expect Chase to win the nomination, and I'm sure that just derailed everything from there. And
Jeremy, do you remember me saying maybe a month or two before the convention, how wild would it be if Angela gets reelected and Chase ends up as the nominee? And then I was like, oh, there's no way that actually is going to happen. That wouldn't make any sense. There's no way a majority of people are voting for Chase and Angela.
Right.
And here we are.
Right. Well, and I mean, I think a lot, and partially, I think because people were, kind of traded out throughout the, the convention, and, it was definitely much more Mises friendly at the beginning versus, toward the end. I mean, still it made for Heiss's greatest moment ever. So
the petulant child clip, right? The one where he's screaming like a petulant child, not getting his way.
Yeah.
How dare you play with my toys? Kind of a moment,
I mean, I'm not sure which is better for Heiss or with Heiss. The clip of the Mises Caucus has also offered Mike Tremont the vice presidential position, or him trying to say that getting paid by completely undisclosed donors, literally paying him a salary so that he doesn't have to work, that's not a conflict of interest. It's like, what are these people paying you for exactly? And I can say, because I was in the Mises Caucus until early 2020, and I was in Mises Caucus leadership, at least to some degree. I was a moderator in the Facebook group, and I was in some of the chats, and I was invited to certain leadership meetings, that Heiss was in contact with people who are now MAGA supporters. He wanted to run Patrick Byrne, who was the CEO of Overstock.com at the time,
that's right, Pat,
as the Libertarian Party presidential nominee in 2020. And I know Patrick Byrne, after the 2020 presidential election, was big on the election was rigged, Trump actually won kind of thing. So he was a huge MAGA guy. So I don't know if Heiss is getting money from him still. I know there was Jim Cantrell, who's been around the Libertarian Party a lot. He was an early backer of the Mises Caucus financially. He's involved in some kind of private space company or something like that. I think that's where he gets his money from. But just the idea that they would be paying him to be chair, and no, guys, don't worry, it's no big deal. It's just absurd to me. And he tried to act like, I think it was Kathy Yanuskavich, I think is how you pronounce her last name. She was going back and forth with Heiss during that LNC meeting. And Heiss basically said that getting a paycheck from Wendy's is just like getting paid to be chair. Like, it's the same kind of thing. I mean, unless Wendy's is paying you to institute certain political positions, I don't think that's the case. And I don't know, maybe I should ask Stephen Nikela if Wendy's has like a plan to take over the country or something like that, but I'm not too worried about that one.
Yeah, when I started watching videos of Heiss, because like I wasn't really involved. I don't know a lot of the history of all of it, but when I watch him speak and when I watch him interact, I go, how did people like think that this was going to be the genius to take things over? Like, I'm not going to lie, I look at it and go, like, he's not even self-aware, right? He's not even self-aware of how he comes across to anybody that's a rational thinker at all. And so I do have a hard time understanding how he exactly inspired people in general. I can understand how the mission would inspire people, the idea of like principle, bold messaging. But that alone, once you start interacting with people that are trying to enact it, and this person is somebody with a very strict hierarchy in the process, I would start to question that a lot of like, is this person even capable of doing this? Is there any other motives? And it seemed like that didn't happen.
I think it ended up being there during some of the rise of this. I think it was basically just Heiss repeating Ron Paul over and over and over, and people being like, oh, yeah. And a lot of it was based on the podcasters that came into the party through the Mises Caucus. It was like, look, Dave Smith's here, guys, look. And then, look, Tom Woods is here, guys. Don't you all love Tom Woods? It wasn't like people really loved Heiss, or I don't think it was really that Heiss himself had that compelling of a message. When Heiss actually gets confronted by people, or when he actually tries to interact with people that disagree with him, whether it's on a podcast or on social media or wherever, it never ends up going particularly well for him. So what he tends to do is just block people. I mean, even in the Mises Caucus Facebook group, which used to really be the medium for communication for members prior to the Discord. So when I was in the Mises Caucus, like the Facebook group was the big thing. There was post approval on. So the moderator chat, when a post came in, it would be like, okay, do we want to approve this? They very carefully crafted the narrative. And I actually got yelled at one of the last days I was there. I was already 1 foot out the door at this point, because I was like, this is not what I was sold. And I was seeing a lot of the red flags that I should have seen in the beginning. But when Maj Touré announced that he was leaving the Libertarian Party, and Maj was like one of Heiss's like golden boys, like that was Heiss's guy. Someone made a post in the Mises Caucus Facebook group saying Maj is leaving, and just posted a screenshot or something like that. I, being a moderator and thinking, oh, this is topical. And I mean, full disclosure, I was not a fan of Maj at the time, and I am not now. He was actually part of the reason I left, some of the rhetoric he was using. I approved the post in the group. I got yelled at for doing that because they didn't have a chance to control the narrative beforehand. So it's all very carefully crafted. They don't want people talking about things that make them look bad or that make them question what the group is saying. I even noticed, because I do have some spies in the Mises Caucus Facebook group. I think the Mises Caucus knows that. I mean, I get stuff out of there all the time. But when Karen Ann Harlos split with the Mises Caucus in mid-2024 or so, there really weren't any posts in the Facebook group about it. And my guess is that it was that Heiss and the others in there didn't want people to see that, because they didn't want people to follow Karen on the way out. The Mises Caucus Facebook account, or social media accounts, and Heiss, they generally tend to block their critics. It creates an echo chamber, and with an echo chamber, it's a lot easier to control the narrative.
Yeah.
Raise your hand if you've been blocked.
I don't have enough hands to raise.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I don't think there is anyone that. I mean, gosh, I don't even know if there's a Mises account that hasn't blocked me, a state level account. Yeah.
For the longest time, I wasn't blocked by Angela McArdle on my personal Twitter account, because I barely ever use my personal Twitter account. I follow like thousands of people on it. Every once in a while, I'll retweet something, but it's basically just for me to like get news and look at sports stuff and stuff like that. So I just sat silent on that account for a while and was just like, I'm just not going to get blocked by Angela. But when she resigned, I quote tweeted her resignation post, which she posted at 2 a.m, saying she's resigning for a new opportunity, which also hasn't been announced yet, but that's a whole nother story. But I posted, when you resign, I quote tweeted it and said, "When you resign abruptly at 2 a.m. for a new opportunity and your resignation totally has absolutely nothing to do with embezzlement." And that one got me blocked pretty quick.
Yeah, I didn't interact with almost any of the Mises Caucus accounts on Twitter, maybe none of them. And then one day I was just blocked on all of them. And I'm like, okay. So like they are purposely afraid of people seeing other narratives that would break apart their control. It's like super obvious. And it's what all authoritarians do. It's what all centralized governments do. You know, it's they're taking a playbook right out from our own government, you know.
No, you're not wrong. It's very cult-like. And I noticed that too at the end of my time there, because I had already left leadership before I ended up picking a fight with Dave Smith. So I already was pretty much out the door at that point. I just figured I'd see if I could convince some people on the way out. And just criticizing Dave Smith a bit caused an entire uproar. They have like their figures in there, their cult figures, that they basically view as gods. And if you say anything bad about them, block. You're just kicked out of the group. You're the other at that point.
Well, it's probably along the idea. I can't remember which philosopher it is, but in that vein of libertarianism, where it's like there'll always be leaders and followers, and maybe they're strictly along the idea that you need a cult of a personality to be that leader, and then everybody else is basically a useful idiot that will follow. And I think they generally view their membership like that. And the minute they find somebody that is one of those leaders that they can't control, they automatically are like, nope, this person remove, right?
Yep.
And I don't know how you sustain a movement that way when you're constantly pulling them out. I mean, unless your whole argument is that there's going to be this endless resource of people that are going to come there, I just don't see that being a thing. I think eventually everybody will be blocked, and it'll just be Michael Heiss sitting there on the Mises account talking to himself and his 25 other alt accounts pretending like he's popular or something,
Right. Well, and I mean, and that's the thing is it's interesting, and I know I want to say I've probably mentioned this before, is I mean the Libertarian Party is almost kind of this microcosm of even what's happening in the country as a whole, because the Republican Party is really no different. I mean, it's just a cult of personality centered around Trump. There's just a lot more resources than libertarians have, and operating like that and operating essentially as a cult of personality, or a few personalities, is not going to end well. It never does. It never has. It isn't sustainable. Especially if you don't have successors, like Republicans really don't right now. The moment Trump strokes out or whatever happens to him, it's going to be messy, because people are going to try to fill in that leadership vacuum, but nobody is ever going to be as good as or say the exact right things, because Trump always says the right things, regardless of what they are.
Regardless of whether he's changing his mind or saying,
and regardless of whether it's right or not.
Right. I mean, he's a genius on the on the tariffs, even though the on-off switch has been flipped on more times than in the last month. But yeah, it's just it's never going to end well. I mean, look at how they're treating Amy Coney Barrett, because she didn't side with fucking Alito. That courts don't have jurisdiction over what the president can do. I mean, is basically, he straight up admitted it. At least where his position is, and it's like, and now she's Amy Coney Barrett, and
yeah, I've seen
it's just
MAGA people mad about that.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's what happens. It's what is going to happen, at least Mises wise. The LP may carry on now that Mises doesn't quite have the stranglehold of power, absolute power like they did, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see kind of where everything ends up.
I just wanted to draw attention to this comment because if it's real, I need to watch it. Someone on YouTube said there's a 45-minute podcast of Dave Smith getting bullied by Armenian teenagers, and that just sounds amazing. I know it has nothing to do with anything we're talking about right now, but
citations needed for sure.
Yeah, if you could link us to a name or something, that would be great. Because I would love to watch that.
Yeah, me and Dave don't get along too well. He blocked me a few years ago.
Not.
So, speaking of Mises being a cult, in my time in there, one of the big bad names other than Sarwark was Andy Craig, and they would always use him as kind of a punching bag counterexample, and one of their primary focuses of their hate because he was a prag and this and that and the other thing, and they tried saying he was, really far left and all kinds of nonsense. Serendipitously, he just showed up in my feed with an amazing comment that I'm going to read out. Folks can do what they want, but I remain firmly convinced there is nothing of value in trying to retake the ex-Libertarian Party, and by all indications, little success to be had in trying. At most, all you'd get out of it is the name, and the value of that, parentheses, which was never exactly great, close parentheses, is now irrevocably tarnished. Becoming an avowed hate group isn't something that washes out with a rebrand and hanging up an under new management sign.
Well, I think if you were to take it back, it would have to be the kind of thing where you made really dramatic changes when you did take it back. You have to make it really clear that these people had nothing to do with us, really condemn them, and also make sure that it were to not happen again. There have to be some serious organizational changes there, whether it's bylaws changes to the platform, and other changes. It can't just be, okay, we have it back now, let's just do what we did before, because whatever we did before ended up leading to this, for better or for worse.
Right. Well, and once again, microcosm of the entire, entire political climate as a whole, because
I just want to warn them, my PC for some reason is not charging, so if I die out, I apologize.
We can wrap soon if you're having an issue.
I'm sorry for cutting you off. I didn't want to just leave out of there and be like, I don't agree with. I'm agreeing with what you're saying, but I just don't want to be like, oh, this is the reason he left.
But look at basically what happened to the country is Biden kind of just continued business as usual, and there were no major changes made, and look, we're right back to where we're at. Or where we were at, if, not an even worse position. And, going back to taking 10 plus years to really rebuild the party after all of this, it's probably realistic, because it is going to have a stain on it for so long that, you almost have to wait for, literal generational change, and before things can, before it can be labeled positive again, at least.
And I would say, too, that even if we got to a point where we took the party back from Mises and we ended up having so many issues that we weren't effective as a political party for a long time, I would still rather the party be in the hands of actual libertarians than people who are going to use it for the kind of things that Mises is going to use it for. Like, even just running interference on what people like LP and H are doing, I think is something to strive for.
No, I understand people, looking at it and saying there's going to be nothing but a grim outcome, and that there's not much you can do. I would say, I think for the most of public does not see what LPNH does. It seems like it's something that might be widespread knowledge, but unless you're really in it, you don't know it. And I think the majority of America doesn't really know what libertarianism means. And if we just let it go, then kind of the history that was very positive for a while will kind of be forever tainted, instead of it being like this dark period that we can correct and maybe bring forward.
I think you might have just lost power.
We lost him.
We lost him. Aw.
Guess we should have wrapped a few minutes ago. But
What did he say was powering down his phone or something, or what?
yeah, I think he was running low on batteries.
Yeah,
or
something
something.
wasn't
This is
charging,
why, as
so.
an IT guy, I always say plug your devices in.
Sometimes it's tough. I've been there. Oh, wait, we've got him back.
Yeah, I switched to mobile.
There you go.
Ran out of electrons.
Yeah. But you know, I can understand people basically being like, I've had enough. I don't see it being a pathway forward. I look at it like this is a long-term thing, and I believe basically what you said, John, too. That if it is not something that can be reclaimed, at least stopping that from tainting its history would be a valiant effort. But I tend to believe that things can be turned around. The American public's understanding and brand awareness of libertarianism hasn't been as tainted as it has been internally. We're all very aware of it, right? All the libertarians that don't like this. But I think there's still a chance that we could do something with it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And right now there's
average. Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, I'm sure if you ask the average American, I'm sure Republican that smokes weed is probably going to still be the the number one.
Which we need to
view
work
of-
on too, obviously, even beyond
Right.
just the LP
Yeah,
kind of issue.
Yeah, it's just somebody who smokes weed. It's not a Republican who smokes weed. It's just somebody who smokes weed as well.
Someone who smokes
Yeah, you
weed.
got to remove the Republican from it. But yeah, so hopefully that's something we can do in general. And again, I think if the party was not internally destroyed, we would be in such a good spot right now, at least to take it over. And if worst case scenario, it's like hey, I would much rather have the moniker of, oh, that's the party, that's the Republicans that smoke weed, than the alt-right, white covenant city party of New Hampshire, right? Like that's that is a outcome that I do not want to have maintained. And so if that's not enough to motivate people currently, or they need a break or whatever, I understand. But I do think it's a long, long fight to kind of fix the party. And so if people have been fighting for a while and they need a break, then okay, like you take break, but hopefully you'll come back to the front lines and be willing to support the effort, especially if you see things like what happened in Georgia today, where the numbers are very close. Right. So in key states, if just a few more people that used to be there that really cared about it came back, even just to say, not in the name that I used to care about. Right. I just don't, you don't want it to continue going in the direction it is now. Being willing to show up in those, if possible, I think would make a huge difference. And I think if everybody that really doesn't like what the party is doing now came back, their numbers are weak enough that it would be like over immediately. Right. And I don't know if people recognize that, or if they're just like, hey, the brand is so tainted that it won't come back. If that's the case, then I understand it. But then a lot of those same people are going to the Liberal Party, and the word liberal has been tainted, not in the same way, definitely not as bad in my mind as what LPNH has done, but it's still a word that they're trying to transform. And if the word libertarian didn't used to be that way and it can be transformed back to where it was, I think it's still possible. And again, if they just showed up, it would happen. Right? It's not that it would just be possible. It would actually happen, that we could at least start that progress.
And even if people think that taking the party back won't really do much because of the issues with how the name has been tainted, if we took the party back, we might get another really funny video of Michael Heiss yelling. So that might be worth it.
People are buying plane tickets for the next convention right now because of that statement.
If anything, we'll have the memes. Yeah. Oh, it looks like
if you can't have your dreams, at least have your memes.
Minnesota's convention was this weekend too.
Was it?
See, we already got somebody else saying they're in. See, that's maybe the entire alliance, that needs to be the pitch. Like that, we're just going to get one more video out of Heiss, and maybe that'll be enough to entice people back.
One more screaming video of Heiss. I'm okay. I'm okay with that being the enticer there.
So there's a question here that's showing up on my screen. So someone just put it there. It said, is there much hope of bringing the offshoot parties back into the LP if we were able to reform things? I assume he's talking about some of the split offs like in New Mexico and the alternative party in Massachusetts.
The Liberal Party.
Yeah.
The whole Liberal Party structure, yeah.
I think it would take some real work, but I do think it's possible to get some people back. Do I think the current LNC is going to do anything like that? I don't. But in a hypothetical situation where a new LNC came in and really railed against what had happened before and came out with a completely different message and made sure that something like this wouldn't happen again, I do think that there's a good chance that we could get a lot of people back. I don't think you're going to get everyone, but I think a lot more money would come flowing in, a lot of old institutional knowledge would come flowing in, and a lot of old members would come flowing in.
I will say I went to LPPA convention and, people had talked about members that had walked away and that they're now in these other parties and how it was like one of the biggest losses to the state party. And, I hope people will come back. I hope, enough people can work together to make it a place where they would want to come back. I look at it that anybody that really wants to make the government smaller, less intrusive, less oppressive, I think anybody that wants that should be essentially in the party and helping move that forward. And if down the road we get to a point where the anarchists, we need to go further, and then the other one's like, no, we're fine, and split off then if it's, at various points. But where we're at now, there's no reason we shouldn't be able to agree on some things and get things done. But I understand why they would not want to associate or be in a culture of it as it stands now. And I think they would come back if it was a better culture. But from my perspective, looking around at the convention numbers, I look at it and say, if you just came back, it would be better. Right? It's not just I'll come back when it's better, but like it really would be a place where I think they could enact some of their versions of it. And again, the idea of primarying libertarians of different stripes against one another would be good. It would make people have to recruit new members. It would have to get new donations and stuff in. And I think that's how we could cause like an exponential growth in our party. Is let's say you have a conservative minarchist versus a left-leaning minarchist, and both of these people are running and have the best chances of winning in places. If they're primarying each other, they're forced to grow to get the support necessary to be elected. And I think that sort of market pressure is needed to really change it. And then by that process, they are the ones going out as candidates representing the party. The candidates should be the ones that are really representing the ideas of the party, not having these kind of just online shit posting accounts that are representing the party. That's not what it should be ever, right?
Yeah, and I miss the days of the Libertarian Party where it was like the anarchists were arguing with the minarchists, or people were arguing about like what government program should be cut before another government program, instead of like where we are now, where it's like, should we have white nationalists here, or should minorities have rights? Like the old days had fighting, but it was actually like largely productive at the time, or it was actual acceptable disagreements. It wasn't like it is today, at least since I've been involved. And I've been a libertarian, small L, since around 2010, and I joined the party in 2016.
Yeah, I would love to go back to those kind of days. That would be a dream condition essentially for me, is where it's like, let's have these debates, but respectably. And white nationalism is not welcome here, right? Like that should be and really any nationalism, in my opinion. But
yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah,
that's how it used to be. It used to be the Libertarian Party, or libertarians in general, were very anti-nationalism, and now with all the stuff with Trump, I think that's when things started to really turn, is when Trump started to get popular during his run. I noticed a lot of people that, whether they called themselves libertarians still or not, that really changed their views and started to pander towards that subset of people. I can think of some in particular, but it seemed like Trump, when he first started to get popular, kind of rotted some people's brains.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how it happened though. As somebody who's like been a skeptic forever, seeing it just be people be so easily swayed, like it's just like they hear one word that aligns with maybe their worldview, but then 1,000 other words that don't align with it. How is that somebody you're immediately going to latch onto just because they have some populist leaning in general, or populist language or something? I don't understand it.
It was very cult-like, kind of like the Mises Caucus. It was very similar in that way, and it turned into a situation where Trump can say something and everyone just believes it, even if it has, or every one of his supporters just believes it, even when it has absolutely no basis in fact. Like, you can just go off about immigrants eating the dogs and eating the cats, and it's like, oh yeah, they're eating the cats. Like, okay, I believe it.
And then you have some like lady talking to her husband, like, "Can you believe they're eating the cats over there in that town? And we got to do something about it." Yeah, I think just media in general has rotted people's ability to like critically think about anything. And then if you like somebody, you're just going to trust what they say, which is, we shouldn't be teaching anybody that as a method of looking at the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So does anyone have anything they want to cover before we wrap up today?
No, I think that covers it for me, at least.
Archie, you got anything? All right. So before we wrap up, Phil, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I mean, just check out our Twitter, LPAlliance. Check out our Discord, our website. We run a blog, basically. It's called The Torch, and any one of our members can submit a written document that they want to have up there. If there's disagreements, they happen kind of respectfully, and so if you really want to hash out ideas with other good faith libertarians that you might disagree with, it's kind of a place for that to happen. If you want to see, basically the party come together, unite, and fix it. So we really focus on liberty first, on merit for people to be in positions. Come there. It's, everybody just kind of does their own thing. If you have a specialty and you're like, hey, I'm really good at this, like web design, people have just kind of voluntarily been getting involved, and it's kind of just been entirely spontaneous order so far. And so, maybe I should make that clear again, since it was confusing to people, and Archie brought it up. I am not the leader of it. It really is just a group of people that are like, we see a problem, we want to come together to fix it. And if you feel like things are not being done correctly inside of it and you want to have a say, come say something, have discussions. As long as they're respectful, it's always welcome. And the more people there to kind of shape the way this kind of collaboration and coalition goes, the better, right? The more different types of libertarians we can get in there, I think that the stronger the chances of a outcome that's kind of amenable to all will be there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Phil, for coming on today. And to everyone watching, we'll see you again soon.
Take care.
Buy shirt, get money. No, other way. We get money. You send money, we get shirt.